The first thing she said after I found her lying alone in the freezing snow wasn't, "Help me." It wasn't, "I'm hurt." It wasn't even my name. Looking into my eyes with tears frozen against her cheeks, my best friend's mother whispered that if I stopped moving for even a few minutes, neither of us would ever see another sunrise. In that terrifying moment, surrounded by endless white mountains and absolute silence, I realized that surviving the storm would mean carrying a secret that could change every relationship in my life forever. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. There are moments when life quietly changes direction without asking permission, and for me, that moment began on what was supposed to be an ordinary winter hiking trip. My name is Nolan Mercer, and I had spent most of my life in the small mountain town of Pine Hollow, where snowy peaks surrounded every road like silent guardians. My closest friend since childhood was Elias Thornton. We had grown up together, scraped our knees together, dreamed about leaving town together, and somehow always found ourselves back on the same hiking trails that had shaped our childhood. His mother, Celeste Thornton, was one of those rare people whose kindness never felt forced. She remembered birthdays, baked pies for neighbors who were sick, and somehow knew exactly when someone needed encouragement before they admitted they were struggling. After Elias's father passed away from a heart attack 6 years earlier, she became the emotional center of their little family, hiding her own grief behind gentle smiles that convinced everyone she was stronger than she actually felt. What almost no one knew was that the loss had quietly hollowed her from the inside. She continued volunteering, continued laughing, continued showing up for everyone else, but loneliness settled into her heart like winter settling over the mountains. Elias had recently accepted a demanding engineering job 3 states away, promising to visit every holiday, yet work kept delaying every trip. Phone calls became shorter. Video chats became less frequent. Celeste never complained. She simply kept saying how proud she was of her son. One bright morning, after several days of heavy snowfall, Celeste decided to revisit a scenic overlook where she and her late husband used to watch the sunrise every anniversary. She left a note for a neighbor saying she'd be back before dinner. She carried a backpack, a thermos of coffee, and the faded photograph she always kept tucked inside her jacket. Nobody imagined that fresh snow had buried sections of the trail, making familiar paths almost impossible to recognize. By noon, the weather changed without warning. Dark clouds swallowed the blue sky. Powerful winds erased footprints within minutes. Snow began falling sideways, turning the mountains into a blinding maze. When Celeste didn't return by late afternoon, panic spread through town. Elias called me from hundreds of miles away, his voice shaking harder than I'd ever heard. He begged me to help the search teams because I knew those mountains almost as well as the local rangers. Every minute mattered. The rescue crews split into different directions before sunrise the next day. Helicopters couldn't fly because of dangerous winds. We searched on foot, calling her name until our voices grew hoarse. The snow reflected sunlight so brightly that everything blurred together, making every rock resemble a person curled beneath white blankets. Hope slowly gave way to fear. Hours passed before I noticed something almost invisible near a line of pine trees. It wasn't movement. It was a faded red scarf barely sticking out from the snow. I ran. Digging with numb hands, I uncovered Celeste lying against a fallen log, exhausted, pale, and barely conscious. Relief crashed into me so suddenly that I almost collapsed beside her. She managed a weak smile before whispering that the storm had disoriented her and she'd slipped down a steep slope, injuring her ankle. She'd tried climbing back but every direction looked identical. The temperature was dropping dangerously fast. Our radios had stopped working after getting soaked in snow. The nearest rescue team could have been miles away. Looking around, I understood something terrifying. We couldn't stay exposed another hour. I helped her into the shelter of a rocky overhang where the wind couldn't strike us directly. We gathered broken branches beneath the dry section of the cliff, but everything was too wet to ignite. The cold kept stealing our strength. Her lips had turned blue. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. I looked into her frightened eyes and quietly told her that we had to keep warm because if we surrendered to the cold, rescue would arrive too late. She nodded. We wrapped ourselves inside every emergency blanket and spare jacket we had, sitting shoulder to shoulder while blocking the wind as best we could. There was nothing inappropriate or uncomfortable about the moment. It was simply survival. Human warmth against deadly cold. Two frightened people refusing to give up. To keep her awake, I asked about her happiest memories. Instead of talking about herself, she talked about Elias. She remembered his first bicycle. His first baseball game. His graduation. The way he cried after losing his father but tried hiding the tears because he thought being the man of the house meant never appearing weak. Listening to her, I realized how much of her own life had disappeared into caring for everyone else. As daylight slowly faded behind the mountains, she confessed something she'd never told anyone. She admitted that she hadn't come to the overlook only to remember her husband. She came because she no longer recognized the woman she'd become. The house felt too quiet. The holidays felt too empty. She worried she had become a burden every time Elias apologized for missing another visit. She insisted she would never tell him because guilt wasn't the inheritance she wanted to leave her son. Her words broke something inside me. Everyone believed she was the strongest person in town. In reality, she'd been carrying unbearable loneliness all by herself. The storm grew louder. Snow buried the entrance of our rocky shelter inch by inch. I fought sleep because I knew freezing victims often drift away peacefully without realizing they were dying. Every few minutes I encouraged her to move her fingers, talk, remember another story, anything to keep her conscious. Then she looked at me with quiet sadness and admitted another truth. Months earlier, doctors had discovered an early heart condition. It was treatable, but she delayed surgery because she didn't want Elias spending his savings flying home or missing work. She convinced herself there would always be more time. There wasn't. At least not anymore. For the first time in years, she cried openly. Not because of the cold. Because she realized how much of her own life she'd postponed while protecting everyone else's happiness. Those tears hurt more than the freezing wind. Morning finally arrived with pale sunlight breaking through the clouds. The storm had weakened. We tried climbing together, but her injured ankle gave out after only a few steps. Supporting nearly all her weight, I pushed forward through waist-deep snow, hoping every ridge would reveal rescuers. Instead, we found another surprise. Half buried beneath fresh snow stood an abandoned ranger cabin. The roof was damaged, but one room remained mostly intact. Inside were old blankets, canned food, and enough dry wood to finally build a fire. The warmth felt like a miracle. As orange flames filled the room, color slowly returned to Celeste's face. She smiled for the first time since I'd found her. For several peaceful hours, we talked about life without pretending everything was perfect. She admitted she'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone care for her. I admitted that I'd spent years believing strength meant solving every problem alone. Somewhere between those conversations, we both understood that survival isn't only about escaping danger. Sometimes it's about allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Late that afternoon, distant voices echoed through the valley. Rescuers. They found us alive. When the helicopter finally lifted above the mountains, I watched tears stream down Elias's face as he waited at the rescue station below. He ran toward his mother before anyone could stop him, wrapping her in the tightest embrace I'd ever seen. Neither of them spoke for almost a minute. They simply held each other. Everyone assumed the nightmare was over. They were wrong. The real challenge began after the rescue. News spread quickly through town. Some people admired the survival story. Others created ugly rumors about the hours Celeste and I had spent alone together in the mountains. Small towns sometimes invent stories faster than they discover truth. Whispers reached Elias before explanations did. Although he never accused us directly, I saw uncertainty hiding behind his eyes. That uncertainty hurt more than the freezing storm ever had. A week later, Celeste invited both of us to her house. She placed the same faded photograph of her late husband on the kitchen table. Then she calmly explained everything. She described the storm, the injury, the freezing temperatures, the desperate fight to stay alive. She looked directly at her son and said that if I hadn't insisted we stay together to preserve body heat, she would not have survived another hour. Silence filled the room. Then Elias stood, walked toward me, and hugged me with tears rolling down his face. He apologized for allowing rumors to become louder than trust. He thanked me for giving him something no amount of money could ever replace. His mother. That moment erased every misunderstanding. Several months later, Celeste finally underwent the heart surgery she'd been postponing. The procedure was successful. Recovery wasn't easy, but she no longer faced it alone. Elias arranged a remote work schedule that allowed him to spend several weeks back home. Neighbors organized meal deliveries. Friends repaired parts of her house she'd ignored for years. Watching the entire community come together reminded me that kindness spreads quietly, often beginning with one difficult decision made during someone else's darkest hour. Spring eventually melted the snow that had nearly taken her life. Wildflowers appeared where frozen drifts once stood. One afternoon, the three of us returned to the same overlook. The mountain looked completely different beneath blue skies. Celeste smiled as she placed fresh flowers beside a small memorial stone honoring her late husband. Instead of crying, she thanked him for the years they shared before turning toward the future with peaceful eyes. She admitted she finally understood something she'd resisted for years. Loving those we've lost doesn't require stopping our own lives. The greatest way to honor them is to keep living with courage, generosity, and hope. Standing there, I realized the mountains hadn't only tested our endurance. They had revealed hidden fears, broken silence, repaired relationships, and reminded us that even the strongest people sometimes need someone willing to stand beside them through impossible storms. Speech balloon special request: before the story ends, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in this situation? If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more meaningful and inspiring stories. Your support encourages us to keep creating stories that touch hearts around the world. Life has a remarkable way of leading us into storms we never expected, but it also places extraordinary people along our path when we need them most. Never assume the strongest smile hides no pain, never let pride prevent you from asking for help, and never underestimate the power of simple kindness. Sometimes saving a life begins with nothing more than refusing to leave someone alone in their darkest, coldest moment. Love grows through compassion, forgiveness heals what suspicion cannot, and second chances remind us that hope is always stronger than fear when we choose to face life's mountains together.